Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Today's show is brought to you by OnPay, the new standard in payroll. You can pay employees and contractors in minutes, automate your payroll taxes and filings, as well as provide health benefits and HR in all 50 states. For more information, visit buildingthefutureshow.com/onpay. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Andrew Wyatt. He's the CEO and co-founder at CALA. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you.
I'm very well. Yourself?
Doing great. Sheltering in place.
Yeah, fair enough. Like the rest of us, right? So, what you guys are doing at CALA is actually really innovative and cool. But maybe before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Okay.
And born in Florida, so a bit of a Southern boy, but people tell me that somehow I managed to not get the Tennessee accent after being there for about 10 years.
Okay, very cool. So you went to university. What did you take and why?
So from the time I was about 8 years old, I was confident I was going to be an anesthesiologist, pediatric anesthesiologist.
Why is that?
I had a great experience with the anesthesiologist when I was getting my tonsils out, and he kind of explained to me that he was the unsung hero kind of behind the scenes, but, super critical role and really cool guy. And so for whatever reason, I was stuck on that. So went to University of Tennessee, studied pre-med, and even through high school was starting to do a lot of shadowing at hospitals and doctors' offices and stuff. And I kept seeing all what I, even as a young person, perceived as like gross inefficiencies.
Okay.
And so I was curious around what can a practitioner do to be more efficient and whatnot. And so I started taking some business classes on the side.
Okay.
And one day in one of my business classes around operations and manufacturing, the professor spoke about lean manufacturing for healthcare. And that moment set me on a path that's kind of impacted the rest of my life. And long story short, I ended up getting a dual degree in pre-med and logistics, supply chain management, ended up working for a pharmaceutical company in India doing a sort of domestic, pretty crazy logistics problem. And at the same time, had gotten into medical school, in the sort of cliche way, went to India, decided to bail on my whole life plan and focus specifically on supply chain.
Okay, interesting. So walk us through the rest of your career and then how you and your co-founders came up with the idea for CALA.
Yeah, so, much to my parents' dismay, I came back from India, told them I was no longer going to be a doctor. Luckily, the same group that was doing and kind of really pioneering lean for healthcare at the University of Tennessee were plugged in with a number of huge multinational companies that they were doing executive education for. And this one company called Grundfos, based in Denmark, were looking for a profile for this special program where someone that had clear international experience, but had worked in logistics and things like that in the past. Ended up moving to Fresno in sort of a 4-part rotation program for them. So I was in Fresno, then I was in Denmark, then I was in Kansas City, and then I was kind of all over the world for the last project: Taiwan, Budapest, China, Suzhou, China, and working on the really macro supply chain problems, like realigning the full North American supply chain, raw materials coming in from Denmark, to one project I was, specifically on the plant floor in Fresno, trying to figure out a way to optimize, a specific pump line and get the products to customer quicker.
Interesting.
It was sort of a kind of, fast track of a lot of different supply chain problems at a company that had, over 22,000 employees. And the one thing that I realized is that I can't really make an impact here. And so I was already kind of thinking about like, what can I do to, be more impactful, work at something that's like a little bit more agile, I guess you could say. And I've been reading TechCrunch the whole time. And so I was flying back to Denmark to tell my bosses there that I was going to quit and basically start consulting to them on this project that I was working with, like enterprise social media meets supply chain management. And I met this guy on a plane and he's like, yeah, that sounds kind of cool, but what you should really do is go on AngelList. And, I think that there's a lot of, people that are going to be looking for operations folks in this sort of like Uber cab world. And so he's like, you should go in there and see if you can find something. And so like in the airport in Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, I typed in supply chain into AngelList and Ship with a Y popped up. And they'd just gotten featured by AngelList. And I thought to myself, and you'll appreciate this obviously coming from the design world, but it was shipping and logistics and it was beautiful.
Yeah,
like the interface design was incredible. And I just spent the last 2 years messing around with SAP and ZD195 transactions and I was just like, this is incredible. I have to be a part of this. And so I sent like a crazy cover letter to Kevin and Josh. And a week later, I was in San Francisco pitching them at their house. And like 2 weeks later, I was their first employee and head of operations for Ship.
Very cool, man. Okay. So what made you leave them to co-found CALA?
So in about 18 months, Ship raised $62 million.
Wow. John
Doerr joined the board. There's, hundreds of employees. It was really this amazing, once again, just fire hose to the face experience.
Sure.
I learned a ton. And one of the things that really struck me was that we were hyper-focused on being Uber for shipping because Uber was the biggest thing, it was the biggest name in tech at the moment. And a lot of investors thought Uber for shipping was like one of the cases where it's just so obvious.
Right.
And so we're really focused on the consumer use case. So solving the problem of having to go to the post office.
Got you.
What we found though, is that these same individuals that are potentially, avoiding going to the post office are also using platforms like Etsy, eBay, Shopify, WooCommerce, whatever, to start their own sort of little side hustles or, full businesses. And they started using Ship all the time to basically outsource this kind of core, but not necessarily part of their core competencies as an individual, a core process.
Right.
And at the same time, they're using Instagram and YouTube and Facebook and Snapchat towards the end to, build this audience and market it. And so what was crazy was like, oh, wow, like all these people are using these platforms to basically not have to build, a 20, 30, 40 person company. This is super interesting.
Yep. Okay.
So it just happened that I was connected with some people that were in the fashion space, some friends of friends, and a lot of the early Ship customers in San Francisco were, boutiques or people that were kind of running these sort of like small fashion businesses. And so that's what kind of got the wheels turning around that space. And so I started kind of thinking about, if we sort of look at the future, how our brand's going to be built.
Right.
And it's not the way that it's done today. That's for sure. Requires millions of dollars of investments, deep network and factories and manufacturing in Asia, and tons of expertise when it comes to the technical details. And so you see people that do merch like Teespring and things like that.
Yeah.
But then the barrier from going from merch to launching a proper fashion line is great and dramatic. And so that was kind of the sort of fundamental ideas around CALA. And so I managed to convince one of my favorite engineers from Ship, Dylan, to join me and be my co-founder and start working on CALA.
Interesting. So how did you guys get the first version of the platform built? Did you guys raise some money? Did you bootstrap? Walk us through that.
So we raised a little bit of money, and we made the great San Francisco mistake of trying to come at the problem space with a very techie solution, because we felt like that's what we needed to kind of create a wedge into the space.
Okay, for people that don't understand what that means, do you want to just maybe explain that quickly?
Yeah, so I think I'll give the specifics of our example, but first, I think sometimes people in San Francisco and sort of tech in general tend to oversimplify the way that things are done today and feel like you can just come in with a sort of like, whiz bang tech solution, and then instantly that will become, the universal way that things are done.
Gotcha.
And a lot of times, one of the most important things is change management and, getting buy-in from those, existing players, especially when it's not just a pure tech experience. When it's an online, offline hybrid, you have to really understand and respect what's sort of laid the path for where you are.
Interesting. No, that's really good advice. I 100% agree with you. I've ran into that a bunch, like either personally in my career or just working with other people or just like even other startups. You're just like sure, at the end of the day, the user really doesn't care how cool your tech is if it doesn't work or it doesn't really solve their problem, right? Like it's a bit interesting, right? And like a realization,
absolutely,
right?
Exactly. And part of it is how it's presented to them. Part of it is, do they care? Part of it is, do they just automatically not like you because, you're a threat to the way that things are today.
Sure.
And that's kind of one of the biggest developments of my whole career, is understanding that like the idea is important, but it's not nearly as important as I think a lot of people think it is. A mediocre idea that's well implemented and has full buy-in is something that's going to, fundamentally change, an industry.
Yeah, and realistically.
So let me tell you about my bad idea.
No, yeah, go ahead. Sure.
So our kind of first foray was, we built a mobile app, and by we I mean Dylan. I designed it, but Dylan built it entirely himself in like 6 months, where we could take a few photos and based off of those photos, and you kind of like, place your phone on the floor, take a few photos like front, back, we could pull your individual measurements. And then we would go to designers and we'd say, hey, design a small capsule. We'll buy the raw material up to a certain amount that could make like a certain amount of units that we think we could sell.
Right.
And we'll launch them through the app. When someone buys, if we already have their measurement details on file, we'll just automatically cut and sew and ship it to them. If not, they'll have to take 2 photos, and then we'll cut and sew and make it on demand, ship it to them. And on average, we were in sort of like a 5 to 7 days, because we were already sitting on the raw material in Los Angeles.
Right. Okay. So why did
in retrospect, there's a million reasons why that didn't work.
Okay.
The market is too small. And I think and this is kind of a powerful lesson for people that want to start a brand or a business in general, is when you're getting feedback from people, almost no one will tell you what they really think.
Yep.
And so when we went to, and we were specifically focused on women because, there's a lot of made to measure suiting type stuff for men, and women, body shapes are even more, different than men's are. And so we thought we should, start there. And so pretty much everyone we interviewed, said, absolutely, I want, cool designs, but actually custom fitted to my body. Absolutely, this is something that I'd pay more for. Absolutely, I'm okay if it takes a little bit longer. Turns out not really that many people were willing to wait longer, pay more, or have more awkwardness in the checkout experience.
Got you.
In the world of free returns, you might as well just buy 2 sizes and send back the one that doesn't work.
Yeah, that's fair. Interesting. Good lesson, though.
Most important lesson that we've actually had, because while we were doing that, the tech was cool enough to attract the interest of this company called Made. And they basically were birthed out of Milk Studios, which is where Kanye does a lot of his music videos in LA, and they have a New York office. And so we ended up doing this collaborative event with Made LA. It was kind of like a fashion festival.
Very cool.
And we powered this collaboration between Wiz Khalifa, 424, and this brand Pleasures. And we tried to have, all these people go through our 3D body scanning type stuff. And it was in the process of, sort of prepping for this launch that the designers gave us some pretty tough feedback. And they said, hey, nobody cares about custom fit. And so, of course, being defensive, I said, well, it's going to help you reduce returns. We've actually seen, almost half the return rates for our designers. We don't have returns. Our products sell on Grailed and eBay for, double, triple. Okay.
Interesting.
Well, it'll help get your customer into the right size first. People buy the wrong size just so they can have it. Okay, interesting. So I was like, all right, close my laptop, time to go home, tail between my legs. But then he goes, what you should build is a way where we can just upload our designs and then you make it and it shows up on our doorstep and we don't have to deal with all of the, back and forth because production's a bitch.
Yeah. Interesting.
And they literally in that moment that I called Dylan because he was back in SF. I said, Dylan, I figured it out. Our customers told us what to build. And at that point we were basically entirely out of money. So we worked for the next 6 months. Well, I ended up working for much longer than that with no salary, but we ended up working for the next 6 months, like on our couches, scraping by and building the first sort of V1 of what CALA is today.
Interesting. So how did you guys just live during that period of time? Were you doing some freelance work? Were you working a day job or get us through that period of time?
So, the benefit of, having worked at Ship before was that, once they'd raised $50 million, I was making at least like a decent salary. And so I've been saving a lot. And then, Dylan had sold a company previously. And, he had saved a lot as well. But then if I'm being fully transparent, my wife, well, the girlfriend at the time,
right.
She had a great job. And so she definitely, I covered my portion of rent and that's pretty much it.
It worked out. That's good. But you got to do what you got to do. It worked out. Right? Like everybody's situation is different. So you got to do what you got to do. It makes sense.
Absolutely. And I haven't yet met a founder that's like, it was actually smooth sailing. My financial projections were perfect. I had exactly enough cash saved. And the first person that we pitched, they invested. Like everyone, at least that I've talked to, has this like, yeah, I could barely afford my phone bill. And then at the last moment, it all came together.
Oh, yeah. And I think anybody that tells you that happened is basically just lying to you. Because even the most successful people, even that does happen to, they still struggled well before that in some other thing or different idea, right? That's the thing that I always find interesting about it. It's everybody feels like a complete and utter failure until one day it just happens. Or hopefully it happens. It doesn't always happen.
Well, I also think comfort is the enemy of progress. And so if you're comfortable, you don't have when you don't have to, often you won't. Yeah. And I think that there is some element of when you're just barely going to squeak it out and not be completely screwed, it kind of unlocks, a whole another dimension of humans. And I think we're kind of seeing that right now is with COVID, to be honest, is like when things get really, really bad, only then are we using, all 8 of the top supercomputers in the world to like fight one problem. Only then are people bonding together and trying to come up with solutions. And I'm not comparing starting a company to solving COVID, but there are some similarities to the struggle.
No, it's good advice. So how has CALA stayed the same and transitioned to what it is today from that initial kind of pivot and re-platform to just provide brands the ability to upload their designs and then you guys just handle the rest?
So started with building on top of the existing manufacturers that we'd sort of worked our way in with in LA. And so I started by going to I found like 25 manufacturers on the internet. Turns out if a manufacturer's on the internet, it's not the ones that you want to work with. Gotcha. But luckily kind of worked our way into the underground, largely, Hispanic run apparel, industry in LA and found some great manufacturers there. But then we've now evolved where we hired Lauren Devine, who helped do Yeezy season 1 through 4 for Kanye, was at Helmet Lane, helped launch HBA before that, and then was at Alexander Wang for 3 years after that. So we've basically, we took that initial idea of like just upload my designs and then get it produced, no problem. And we've paired it with experts from sort of the traditional sense. Obviously, she's a little bit more inspiring, having worked for us, smaller and much tighter timelines than the typical, fashion brand. And then I was lucky enough to meet our head of product, Ryan, at a Superhuman happy hour. Oh, and he was the founding designer at Superhuman, which I've been, a huge fan of. And so that, it's like all the pieces have started to come together where it's like, well, you can't just upload your designs. We need to create, I think a lot of times, especially like traditional brands or traditional companies that are building a tech product, they sort of take the offline process and try to build the one-for-one online version of that.
Right.
So you see this with like some of the pattern making software, where it's like, oh, this is your drafting table, and here's your, ruler, just like that ruler that you would have at your desk. And we tried to avoid that by really rethinking, like, the 15-year-old TikTok star in his parents' basement. Like, they're not using a drafting table and a ruler. Like, how are they, explaining what they want? And so Ryan's really helped with those initial, thinking through of the user experience of getting the design ideas out. But then it's kind of like peeling the onion. And what we realized is that, getting the design idea out there is important, but the actual digital supply chain management, approvals and commenting back and forth and timelines and pricing were all sort of things that we've now subsequently solved, which has then, enabled us to solve the next most important customer issue, which is things around like ghost designing and financing and fulfillment and, branding and website design. And so now versus where we were, let's say 2 years ago, CALA is a brand building platform. Everything you need in one place. And, within 3 to 4 months, you can go from, signing to launching your first collection and make $1 million your first year.
Interesting. And then how do you guys monetize the platform?
So we have 3 revenue streams.
Okay.
First is our monthly subscription.
Okay.
And so our lowest subscription is $500 a month if you pay for the full year up front, $750 per month if you do month to month. And then we take a rev share on every deal. So an actual like percentage of the brand sales. And what that does is that enables us to take all of the costs related to launching a successful brand and defer them as much as possible so that you're paying out of the revenue once you're already successful.
I got you.
Historically, you would need $50,000, $100,000, $300,000 just to kind of get that first couple samples out in the first collection. And so, you can sort of do that for as little as $750, but we're really focusing now on what we call our uncapped tier, which is, built for people that already have an existing online audience.
Okay.
Our kind of sweet spot is around 1 million, sort of across all platforms and up. And for those people, it's, it's around like 5,000 a month. And we take like between a 30 and 35% rev share is sort of our list rate.
Got you. Okay. So I just want to go back to the platform a little bit. So walk me through, if I'm a fashion designer and I'm launching a brand today, how do I use CALA? Like walk us through how I would use it and until I get my actual physical product at my door that I can sell to somebody.
Absolutely. So first though, I want to say we don't necessarily even consider our customers to be fashion designers. A lot of them are.
Okay.
It's really, we call them creators.
Sure,
and so
I suppose, yeah,
a creator could be, you could be an NBA player, but you love streetwear. You could be, a professional soccer player, but you want to make handbags. You could be, an OBGYN doctor that wants to launch, a line of, sort of pre and postnatal clothing based on the experience that you've seen. So it's kind of, you don't have to be a classically trained, fashion designer. And if you are, the tools are even more powerful.
Interesting.
The experience and the flow is like this. So you basically, you sign up, you get access to the platform, and you can start adding in mood board reference images. You can just drag and drop any sort of photos, AI files, PDFs, kind of whatever you have.
Okay.
And we have a commenting tool, which now enables you to, anywhere on anything that you upload, you can start annotating and you can start collaborating there as well. So you could, drop a pin on top of a t-shirt and say, I, want this to be a V-neck instead. And you could mention me and say, hey, what do you think about the V-neck? And if I'm a collaborator on your design, I can, reply back, threaded in. I could even, attach an image of a V-neck that I like. So kind of like the notifications that are familiar with Facebook and Instagram, and the comments and threading that's, familiar with those platforms. And then we also have like measurement tools. So you can, click and drag and say, this logo across the chest, I want to be, call it 5 inches or something like that.
Right.
But you can really start with just the sort of high level of what you want. And if you're at our uncapped level, we'll actually, from the very beginning, place an experienced ghost designer with you to actually help you through the creation process. So you could say, I want a streetwear line and I love pastel colors.
Okay.
And they'll start uploading design ideas, that kind of like mirror that. And then in the platform, you can sort of see, all your different designs within the collection. You can remove them from the collection if you want to save them for later. And then when you submit the collection, which is just, clicking a button, within 24 hours, our algorithm will kick back the all-in pricing for the entire collection. So you can see the exact unit cost all in. It includes things like e-commerce product photography, all the technical design, the fabric, the manufacturing, duties, tariffs, importation. Really, for the first time ever, someone can see, before they spend $1 on production, they can see, all right, this t-shirt costs $15. That means if I sell it for $45, I'm going to have a 60, 70% margin. And then real time, you can change the number of units and see how the pricing scales with the number of units.
Oh, very cool. Yes. Okay. Interesting. So, because I've never built my own clothing by any means, but I'm assuming, just based on from what I've heard from others, and it just would probably make sense, that there's probably so many hidden costs and factors that somebody that's never done it before, or maybe has done it before, probably won't even think about, just because of a fabric they pick or whatnot. Do you want to talk about some of that?
Absolutely. So I could speak of this quite well because this is how we started. I went to LA, and I, was blown away by how friendly and helpful everyone was, because they knew that I wanted to start a fashion line. And so the technical design person just charged me $500 to, do a quick, sketch of the idea.
Right.
And then they connected me to their friend that was a pattern maker that charged me $1,000 to do the pattern, and then connected me to another friend who, pointed me in the right direction of like a fabric place. And since we couldn't find the exact fabric we wanted at, Mood Fabric, they, charged me $500 to source from a factory vendor that they knew. So finally I have my fabric, I have my pattern, and then they connected me to a sample sewer who charged me $1,000 to turn the fabric of the pattern into a sample. And of course the sample wasn't what I wanted. And so they're like, oh, well, for pattern revision, it's $150. And, then you have to go get more fabric, and then you have to pay the sample store again the same amount. And so it's the whole system is just set up to just bleed you of whatever, money that dad gave you. And then they're on to the next.
Gotcha.
And what's, interesting through the context of where we are today is like, no designer with the factories that we work at, no one charges for samples. And so like we're sending enough volume to our partner network that, a designer day one on CALA gets the same resources and the same level of experience as if it was Alexander Wang, making 500 hoodies with a manufacturer or something like that.
Gotcha.
And just the time savings and the pain and the cost just there, makes it totally possible for new people to be able to actually be successful.
Interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about some of those integrations that you guys just handle or allow me to connect with pretty easily.
Yep. So baked in to CALA, you get access to our global supply chain.
Okay.
We've modeled it after the way that Zara works.
Right.
And so instead of having one big factory and pushing everything through the same queue, we're basically real-time bidding the project to the best fit manufacturer based on the type of product, number of units, the complexity, and the time of year. And so why this is important is, when you have a black swan event like COVID, if you have everything in a very robust supply chain, and that supply chain is disrupted, your whole year is gone pretty much.
Right.
And so we actually typically in the fall stop bidding as many projects to China due to Chinese New Year. And instead we'll route it to India, Portugal, Central America, US, Japan. And so we actually, in this case, had we still obviously had delays, but the overall impact to our network wasn't quite as dramatic.
Right.
Back to the kind of the flow. So you're communicating to all these people directly through the platform. They're never going to come back to you and try and renegotiate pricing. Everything's sort of taken care of. Once the product's actually completed, we'll do a third-party QA if it's over 100 units per style. Otherwise, the factory will do the QA. And then we'll import it to one of our fulfillment partners. And then we'll basically handle the integration between the fulfillment partner and your Shopify or Squarespace or whatever your e-commerce storefront is.
Okay, interesting. And then who actually ships the products that I created?
So, and I guess to back up a little bit, before you ever get to a point where the production is completely finished, you're approving materials in hand, so they'll be shipped to you wherever you are.
Okay.
Buttons, zippers will be shipped to you wherever you are. Once you've approved that, then they'll send a sample. You'll approve the fit of the sample. If it's not right, we'll fix it, send you another one. And so there's kind of a number of different steps where at each step there's an approval required before we can move forward.
Right.
And so you pretty much know what you're getting. Then once the production is completed, it'll actually go directly to the warehouse. It's barcoded and polybagged. And so then when your customers buy through your site, it's automatically drop shipped to them wherever they are in the world.
Okay, so I don't have to worry about shipping even.
And as with everything on CALA, because of we're basically aggregating a lot of demand together to make us feel huge. Right. And so it would be hard to get amazing shipping rates like we offer, day one to designers, if you were trying to negotiate that directly. As a matter of fact, a lot of the designers wouldn't even be able to, have a direct relationship with our 3PLs partners because they don't have enough consistent volume. But in aggregate, our volume makes us an important partner to our 3PLs.
Interesting. No, that makes total sense. So you talk about, you have like this marketing experts. Do you want to talk about that a bit as well?
Yeah. So when it comes to the marketing front, it kind of goes with this overall theme that we have, which is solving our customers' next biggest pain point. And so initially we were hyper-focused on, of course, design and producing, as the designers from 424 and Pleasures told us to do.
Right.
Then we saw fulfillment, because it's no good if we're just sending you thousands of units to your house or your office. And once we fixed fulfillment and worked on financing, then it became, okay, now we have all this great product. How do we help you sell that? And so a lot of the people we work with are coming with a big audience built in.
Right.
But similar to how we will place a ghost designer with an account, we also have digital marketing experts that will place with an account to help as well. And so, the whole idea here, like, you don't have to be an expert at anything to be successful. Right. And rather than spending eons of time trying to unpack the Facebook ad manager, you can just have a person that will, execute based on the ad sets that you want and the people you want to target, and basically get you amazing return on ad spend. We're averaging over 10 for some clients.
Wow. Very cool. No, that's very cool. And so I'm curious then, how do you guys decide what features to add into the platform? Because you must have, especially probably some of your customers on some of your larger plans, demand or ask for features, but sometimes they might make sense. Other times they don't make sense. How do you gauge what to actually add into the platform without chasing your tail around every request that comes in?
Absolutely. That's a great question, because so many companies get their product strategy is determined by the loudest voice or the biggest customer.
Yeah.
I think part of solving this is being super intentional on who your customers are. And we take a lot of inspiration from Rahul from Superhuman here. Sure. Where, early days Superhuman, they wouldn't even let you, into the beta if you didn't have a MacBook Pro or a MacBook that was, new enough. And that seems crazy to a lot of people, but what it does is it means that the product feedback that you are getting is by the people that you have conviction are your actual target customers.
Yep.
And so that's one piece that we've tried to, implement, is focusing on the people that we know are the customers that we want to build this business around in the first chapter. And so one of the tough things we did was we had to make the call to actually turn off our lowest level tier. And so we had a tier that was basic, and it was $150 a month. And we didn't take a rev share. We didn't offer fulfillment. We didn't offer financing, very stripped down. Unfortunately, we found is that a lot of those people, even with access to our full supply chain, there's so many of the fundamental things around building a brand they hadn't quite sussed out yet. Right. They were just so focused on getting the hoodie with a PVC pocket and a little flight jacket dangly off the sleeve. But once we provided them that at 5 units, they weren't sure what to do next. And it was taking a ton of our time and resources, and they were asking for lots of features that, were kind of potentially going to pull us in the wrong direction. And so we had to make that tough call to kind of cut that tier. We definitely want to bring it back one day, but for right now, it's super important that we're focused on this uncapped tier of customers, because that's where we're seeing that we're providing the most value.
Interesting. I think that's actually really good advice, because it is really hard to make the call to cut off paying customers, even if they are on the smaller side of things, right? Because it's still revenue
Yes.
coming in. Sure, you could argue it's more of a hassle than it's worth, but at the end of the day, especially if you're trying to raise money or put it on a balance sheet, if you cut out that, you're getting rid of a bunch of your customers, right? And especially if you're trying to raise money, that can go, a bunch of ways, and sometimes it looks really bad. But so for you guys to make that call is actually really good advice.
It's tough. You go from a board deck where one quarter your target is 65 customers, and then the next target you're telling them that your target is 15. It's like, wait, what's wrong here? Like, what are you guys doing?
Sure.
And so, it is about ruthlessly prioritizing, ruthlessly focusing. And we're fortunate enough that Janet from our board and our other investors were aligned with what we were sort of seeing, which is that not only would it be better if we close that tier, but it might even be business critical that we remove all the different things we're trying to do and just focus in on one clear customer and one clear value prop for them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting. So we're kind of coming to the end of the show, but I really want to get your thoughts on, is there any other advice or myths that you'd like to demystify, that you see that are pretty common, or you're just like, stop doing this, or you wish more people would do?
I think the idea that the way to launch a successful fashion brand is to make a bunch of samples, do a runway show, and hope to your lucky stars that a retailer is going to give you a nice fat PO and thus kickstart your fashion brand.
Okay.
That's dead. That was dead last year. It was dead 5 years ago. Now it's super dead. As a matter of fact, a lot of great brands have had their wholesale or their PO orders from the retailers canceled because now Neiman Marcus is filing bankruptcy.
Right.
A lot of the smaller, there's so much uncertainty on the retailer side that model is just no longer relevant. Mirror that with all of the tools like Bolt or Shopify or Webflow or, XYZ e-commerce enablers. It's never been a better time to launch a direct-to-consumer brand. And that's, I think my biggest feedback right now is I know things seem uncertain and scary and dark and gloomy, but the bigger you are, the more you have to lose.
Totally.
And so I think there's a McKinsey study that, I think it's like 56% or maybe 80% of large publicly traded fashion brands are now in financial distress, in financial crisis mode. And a large portion of those are going to go bankrupt within the next 12 to 18 months. Anyone who's sitting on a ton of inventory is in a really, really tough spot right now. For an individual or a small group of people that, want to start a brand, they have the opposite situation right now. Like, they're anti-fragile. They have endless opportunity because of all of the struggles that the large, robust players are having at the moment. And so I think there's never been a better time to start a brand, and there's never been more tools to help brands be successful. And so, I think my feedback would be, go for it. Start building now.
Interesting. The other thing too, that I kind of want your thoughts on is I think some people worry about the different sizes and all the returns they're going to get. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think, like, I know there's certain stores I go to, or, well, I just shop online at this point, but, and I have for years, is like, I know that like a medium shirt from this brand fits me perfectly, or I know the jeans from this company, if I get these sizes, in this style will fit me. Like, I think people are smart enough now that once they've ordered a few things from your company and figure out how it fits them, and they might have to send one or two or a few things back, they'll eventually figure out your sizing and what fits them, and they'll just figure it out, right? Like, do you know what I'm getting at there?
Yeah, I do think it's like, I think it's an issue that the large players run into more than the new upstart brands.
Okay.
And here's why.
Okay.
New upstart brands are typically not bringing a $10 white undershirt tee to market as their first product. They're typically bringing to market, maybe it is a tee, but it's a, oversized tee that they're going to try and sell for $60. And here's the story behind it. And this is why it resonates with my audience online. And so when people are supporting you, they have skin in your game almost. And so they've been following you and your story. And so when they buy that product, maybe it is the wrong size, but they're going to be really accepting and help, even provide you product feedback and things like that. And so there's a lot more of like, we're all in it together versus,
interesting.
Oh man, this sucks and I'm not going to support this company anymore. That being said, there's also not nearly enough sort of science that has gone into sizing. And so one of the benefits of CALA is that you can set up your sizing however you want.
Okay. And
we have experts that will help recommend the sizing based on who your target customers are. And so we have one brand that actually offers extra, extra small all the way to extra, extra large. Okay. And it's, crafted around several different people that are those different sizes. And so instead of, following the rule of thumb block, like a lot of the bigger brands do, and by block, I mean sort of like the average sizes of the product, you can sort of make it whatever you want. And so if your medium happens to be extremely large and that's what your brand's all about, great. And as long as it's clearly articulated on the product page, which of course we help with, I think we haven't seen it be a big problem.
No, that's good to know. But sadly, we're out of time. So how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about you guys and any other links you want to mention?
Perfect. So our website is ca.la, and you can sign up there if you're interested. One other interesting thing is if you go to causes.ca.la, the subdomain causes, sure, we're actually doing a program where we're supporting local businesses, musicians, people that are kind of being disrupted by the current coronavirus situation. And so there's about 30 people that we've basically enabled them to create a t-shirt or a hoodie or a tote bag with their brand on it, and they don't have to pay anything up front. And if they sell 20, then we'll make them starting in May and, send them the money. And so it's a great way to, if you are a small business or, a hairdresser or musician, to, not just have people do a GoFundMe, but actually, buy a cool product from you. And it's a way to, give back a little bit.
Very cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.